Welcome to the Jamodi podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is Jamodi, just a matter of doing it. Coaches, the one thing that every team needs is confident shooters. The last 8 years at Grapevine Faith, our teams have averaged 354 made threes each season. I love getting to share with coaches how our shooters train and, more importantly, how they think. If you would like to enhance your shooting culture at your school, contact me directly at jamodipodcast@gmail.com. I don't think I'm very good at using analytics or especially with finding what works best with our style of play. What things should I follow? Should we talk? I mean, I think that's an area of growth for me. What role do analytics play in your coaching style?
You know, I just had a coach on here talk about actually today's podcast that went out to talk about that. Shameless plug for my podcast. I'm just kidding. And they were big on it. Was a college coach at Bob Jones, Burton Uaro. You may know him, but he was really big on field goal percentage. I look at that stuff and maybe I should give it more attention, but I really look at turnover, offensive rebounding percentage, and turnover percentage are the two I focus on this year. Because our style of play, we were trying to force a certain amount of other team and try to limit ourselves to a certain number. And obviously turnover percentage is, if you get 80 possessions versus 50 possessions at 25%, turnover percentage is a big deal. So I think you've got to look at number of possessions. I should give more attention to field goal percentage. I really should. And that's something I want to look in the off season. I've got all the numbers from our team, from huddle assist and things like that. I don't dive into the main analytic I look at, and it's not one of the four factors that we go by, right, is, obviously a player's 3-point percentage in practice and certain things we do to judge if, the freedom they're going to have to shoot in the game. So that's something we look at practice and we track by certain drills that we do. Not that I'm going to tell a kid they can't shoot. That's no fun. But you also want to tell a kid, the ball's got to come back to your hands a second or third time. Or I'll tell kids it's got to be a paint touch kick out three, a penetration kick out three. You're just not catching the pass off one pass and firing it up. But here's your percentage. Yep. And, and I'll break, and, it may hurt their feelings, but like a number's a number. I didn't create the number. They didn't create. It's just you're shooting 22%. We don't need to start off the possession with a 22% shot, but you're shooting 34% when it goes to your hands a time or two. You get a kick out three. So you're going to be shooting less threes a game, but I feel like you'll hit more. Yeah. So I look at it that way. Offensive rebounding percentage, we had our goal this year of what we wanted to get, 30%, and we got that or more most games, and what we want to keep teams below. So I should really do more with field goal percentage, and I will as I'm breaking down film and looking at our past stats in the off season. But rebound and turnover was big. A free throw percentage, obviously, but in Georgia they changed the rule for us where the bonus starts over at the end of the first quarter. Oh. So the days of like, okay, guys, we're in the bonus with 2 minutes left in the first, and we get the whole. Yeah. So now you didn't shoot near as many free throws because it was five fouls was the single bonus, 7 fouls was the double, or maybe 4 and 6. I can't remember, but it started over. That's a
different change. It sped
the games up. Yeah. So then you do that with the shot clock. It's a lot of change.
That's a different game.
I like it. Yeah. Because you get that game, especially you get two like really unskilled teams on the floor, and like, oh my gosh, both teams are in the double bonus and they're in the first quarter, and it's just a free throw fest.
You don't want to look at your clock, but you're thinking of looking at your clock. Sometimes it has to do with the officials too. What type of crew do you have then? I don't know. We never want to blame officials for anything that happens to us, but it plays a factor.
It does. Well, especially if you're coaching the boys game and you're like, man, the girls game's going to go 25 minutes over. Just little things like that. And you're in your routine. You're like, well, guys.
You come out from the locker room. You're like, golly, there's still 5 minutes left.
There's going to be 25 free throws in the next 8 minutes. So that did help speed the game up. And I focus. Obviously we have a percentage we want to hit. But I don't get so locked into the free throws because we don't shoot as many as we used to. Yeah. But it obviously favored teams that play a more freestyle and a foul a little more because, man, that thing restarts at the beginning of the second and the fourth quarter, so that you can get after a little more with some freedom. And we
Definitely.
tried to take advantage
Yeah.
of that.
Definitely you're allowed to be more aggressive throughout if you know that it will. I'm thinking of a few teams that we've played against that, golly, if it reset again and they weren't going to be punished by having to sit at the free throw line, that's huge.
Oh,
I
yeah.
like I said, it's an area like you that I want to grow. Tyler Costin is really big into diving through, and I don't know if anybody's ever had an opportunity to. He'll literally go through your stats with you, like kind of go on through huddle and go through and just what he thinks by looking. And I am looking forward to do that with him. But I'm the last few years I just haven't had many statistical goals or things that were besides just our concepts and the way that we play. Like you mentioned shot selection, or basically you mentioned shot selection
Yeah.
with percentage. I think that's day one of offensive conversation is establishing
Yep.
what your team culture of shot selection is. And that's probably a talk that you and I could have for an hour or
Mhm.
more, because I think that's where you have to start.
Yeah, I think that, and again, this year we played more system style based, and we got away from a little bit at the end, mainly to a couple of key injuries and things. But at the beginning of the year, it was pretty much open season on taking shots. But then once we got about 8 or 9 games under our belt and the true data started coming in,
Yeah.
we started cleaning it up a little bit about who we want taking the shots. And it affected, when you look at those stats, it also affects who you put in the game, who you sub, who you want on the floor at certain times. So I think it's good to look at this stuff. I just don't think we should get too bogged. Again, there's different. Some coaches make every decision based off analytics.
Yeah, you almost
I
take a
think
little
it's
bit of
hard.
the feel and the art
Yeah.
out of it a little bit.
Well, analytically, I may have a guy that says this percentage, for example, a great, but I also know how he guards,
Yeah.
or I know what the other team has on the floor, or I know he's not a great rebounder. So I think we've got to put all this into play, and obviously you have your plus minus and things like that. But I think plus minus gets skewed in junk time,
Yep.
so I think that's really tough to deal with. But I mean, I should. You can only dive into so many things as a coach. I should give more time to the analytics, especially field goal percentage. But I think it is good to pull a player aside and say, hey, when you're on the floor, and I know it's not all you, but there's like a 29% turnover percentage, man. Like we need to, and then we
Yeah.
go watch all his clips of turnovers. So I think that stuff's good. Or guys, hey man, we're giving up 23 free throws a game and we're shooting 12. Here's what we need to do: attack the rim more, shot fake, go off 2 feet. Things like that. I think that players can grasp. I don't think if I was trying to explain field goal to my players, I don't know if that would be where I need to take us mentally. Maybe, but I just don't think I want to bog them down with, some of the minutia of everything.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. It's important to know what your 3 or 4 goals are that really with your style of play.
Yeah.
Because if it just because a big time program has these 4 or 5 things that they chart every game, if they play significant, if their players are different, if their
Yeah.
style is different. I dabbled with the Grinnell system for a couple years, and
Yeah.
actually kind of behind me right there are some books that I
Yeah.
probably will never open again because I love it. It really, I saw some of the magic behind the system when you've got 13 different dudes making threes in a game. There's a lot of fun there, but I also almost lost my job because of it. But with that system, you've got the 5 goals that after a game, you're not really celebrating the win or the loss. Or
Right.
discussing that. You're discussing, did we get 3 of them? Did we get 4 of them? Did we get 5?
Right.
I'm talking, I think we married those two where you can't go so dramatic with that the end result doesn't really matter anymore. But then I think you lose a little bit of credibility with your players if they can see the stats too, and there are some glaring things that you're not discussing or bringing up.
Yeah.
There might start to be some disconnect with you and your players and your style.
No, I agree. I mean, I felt like at the beginning, my whole goal was how many shots did we take per game, as opposed to the other team. And I felt myself talking about that stuff more than more than what we did well or what we did or things I don't know. I mean, I felt like that. Here's the thing. Other teams are being coached well too,
Yeah.
right? The guy on the other end of the bench does a really good job. He's working hard too. He has a style of play. He knows what we want to do, and they're going to do their best to stop us. So, like, if I'm like, we want to get up 80 shots a game, and we get up 67 shots, am I just focused on how we can get 13 more shots up and the offensive rebounding, or I'm talking about some other things we can do well? Or am I like, well, we got 67 shots up, but we won, but I don't care, guys. We want to get 80. I know it's just how we're wired. And I've read the book, The System, and I love that
it's
stuff.
Right up there. It's just glaring at me every day.
But yeah, I mean, and we subbed 5 in. We did sub a ton. We had a set routine of our subs, very scripted. We pretty much did that all year. So there's some things I did adopt, but then I just also had to take a step back and be like, these are the kids I have.
Yeah.
Let's be realistic. So we got away from some of the pressing stuff, but also, and I've heard coaches say this who are pretty good. Once you go deeper in the postseason, you're playing really good teams. And so you've got to be able to play some half court. If you love the system and running and gunning and all that, you've got to be able to do half court stops and play half court, because the other team, they got to the postseason doing their style as well.
And if they're superior in many ways, then you don't want to necessarily play the possession game.
Right.
You want to, in some ways, slow it down, even on either end of the floor.
Yeah.
So I think that we've covered a lot of cool things with that, some good ideas. I think at the end of the day, we got to know our team. We got to feel comfortable with the style of play that we have, and really know our why. Like, what are we trying to accomplish? Because if it's just like you mentioned, 80 shots, well, if 67 helps us win, and we got those 67 in a different way than we typically do, it's not wrong. And,
right.
So I think I like where your head's at there.
Yeah, and this, I mean, I spent all off season diving into this and watching stuff and talking to tons of coaches, and I thought that I was going to be like system guy, but I'm not. But I know very few people who run true system. Most of the system guys I know.
Are you talking about like the Grinnell style system when you say system?
They call themselves the system, whatever.
I was more hybrid.
Yeah. So, I mean, we got away from pressing some for a couple of reasons. But, man, I tell you, our half-court defense could lock you down too.
Yeah.
You're
giving up 8 seconds. That's it.
And we'd give up 8. We'd get out and run when we could, but we didn't feel the pressure. Like we had to take a shot. So, a part of me learning that system it helped me really kind of figure out who I am as a coach after doing this for almost 2 decades, which I think is good. Study other systems, try other systems, but you're right. It can cost you your job. Or
that one, close. Especially if you go all here's one area that I thought I was starting to have some real parent pushback with it, from especially and on both ends of it, from our best players' parents and from the middle of the pack and at the end, because at the end they're playing a little bit, but it's not enough, and the best players are playing almost equal amount as the lesser players or younger player. And I thought to myself in my head, I'm thinking, I wish they could just see what I see on the floor. They don't get it, but there's something to that. But not that basketball is difficult. I do think it's helpful when a parent, they don't have to understand everything that you're doing, but it has to make a little bit of sense to them. If it's just completely like, this is foreign, I've never seen this. You're either going to hopefully have an administration that can have your back and help you push through the wall. But I think there's something to that.
Yeah. I think I'll get pushed back next year because I won't be playing as many kids. Like, I was playing 11 kids in the first quarter, almost every single game, 11 kids.
That is fun.
But it was like one kid would go to the minute left. I would start my 5, we would go 3, then we go 2, then we go. And then obviously third quarter is based on fouls, and the fourth quarter is based on kind of feel how the game's going. But I don't see me playing 11 kids again, because we're going up to a much more difficult overall 2 classification jump.
Yeah.
So
32-minute game, right? 32-minute game. I just don't, from being a system guy before or a hybrid of it, I don't feel like we ever got opponents tired enough. And I never feel like our players got tired enough to really justify subbing that much. So the last 3 years at Faith, we've gone 7 or 8 deep, and winning helps justify that to some people. Why are we doing that? Well, we're keeping our best players on the floor a majority of the time to give ourselves the best chance to win. And I ultimately think too, even though it's not all about winning, and we've talked a lot about culture today, there is something I think valuable with everybody in your program knowing. It's with Coach Tang. He just got the Kansas State job. I don't know if you saw the video of him talking to his team. Guys, listen, if you're not about winning with everything that you're doing, I got chills just listening to him say that, and there is something to that.
I think for me, I may just keep less guys in the program because I don't love dressing 15 guys. When I was playing 12 and 13, it was one thing, but if I'm going to be playing eight guys, maybe 9, I don't need to dress 15 guys.
Because deep down that even if at the beginning of the season you lay it out, listen, you're probably 12 through 13, 15 on the roster. I don't see you getting a lot of playing time, but I want you to be a part of this. I want you to give your very, very best and still have a big role or important role in the team. Deep down, that sounds good in the moment. 10, 11 games in, that bench starts to really get at them.
Well, I think, and again, we're dealing with high school kids. It's tough to go 4 or 5 straight games, 2 straight weeks without playing.
Yep.
It's tough.
It's valuing time. Like at what point for a kid that isn't young and looking towards something, but he's a junior or a senior, he's not getting a lot of time. At what point do they sit around and look like or think about the time I'm spending here, I could do other things.
Yeah, and the college level is different because you have your walk-ons, you have your scholarship players.
They know what they're getting into.
Know, but see, high school, and I do think it's an ego thing. Like you sit there, weekend, day in, day out, night in, night out, and if it's a close game, you're not going to get in, and if it's a close game, you're not going to put them in, right?
That's right.
And parents are there, friends are there, all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying that's what we should think about. But I think we've got to look at the humanity of this stuff. It's not wrong to say, if a kid is a little disgruntled, and I haven't had real issues with it. I have it sometimes, but this year it wasn't bad. But I think, have an honest conversation with a kid. And I've even said to kids, like, hey, look, you've been on the program. You've been a part of the program for 3 years. I like you. Good guy. I'm not going to cut you, but if you don't want to play, I'm laying it all out for you. You're not a quitter. Do you want to be a part of this? Because you're really not. And I was like, yeah, I want to do it, Coach. I like the guys. I like the bus trips. I like it. I like the gear. Yeah, whatever. But some kids are like, you know what? If I'm going to be the 15th guy or I'm the 4th guy on the post depth chart,
I think that shows. I think that honors them. It's showing honor and respect to them and their families.
100%.
And this isn't about any other sports, but I feel there are some sports or at least programs that I've been around that I feel like kids are promised things and things that it's really hard as a coach to promise somebody that early on, unless it's LeBron on your team as a high school kid. Yeah, LeBron, you're probably going to play a lot in this game. The majority of them, though, are 7 through 12, you don't know how things will go. So not promising that. I can remember a few years ago, we won a game against a district rival. I didn't play. I went real short, didn't play a couple kids. One kid was a little teary in the locker room, which got at my heart because I'm thinking, like, we just won. You got to be about more than that. But then I came out and I saw his dad, and his dad shook his head at me. And I was like, what's going on? He's like, well, I'll just have to pick up the pieces later on. Like, pick up the pieces. We just won. His grandparents came to the game, drove hours to come watch him play. And, I do think it's important especially at the high school level, that we keep the main thing, and remember that it's our job, but it's their game.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a fine line. It really is, because we talk about like play for love of the team and your school and the name on the front. You're a Trojan. You're a whatever your mascot is.
Lions,
You're the Lions. But it's like, I just feel like we got to stop being cliche coaches and just have I got a kid, he's a junior. And I said, hey man, you're behind 2 freshmen for varsity. Can you deal with that? And I'm not saying you can't pass them, but it's going to be really, really, really hard. And the challenge is I want you to work to pass them. But I think what we do, we tell all these players like, hey, get better, get better, get better. You'll move up the totem pole or the depth chart. But what if the guy in front of you got better equally? You haven't passed him. And we refuse to have these conversations. We throw out cliches and we don't ever talk about. I mean, I think the worst thing to tell people is don't talk about playing time. I'm like, parents, I'll meet with you.
Yeah.
I'll talk about playing time. I'm not going to talk about John's playing time or Mandy's playing time, but I'll talk about your son's playing time. That's like having a meeting with a parent and saying, I'm going to talk about everything but their grades in the class. We would never do that. So we do some of these asinine things, these things in coaching. And it's like no kid joined the team to ride the bench. Now they know a lot of times they're going to sit the bench, but I feel like we just need to be honest with them. If they decide not to play, we don't label them a quitter. We don't do this. Like, hey man, you want to get a job? You want to play another sport? You want to wrestle? I've taught 2 kids into wrestling. They helped our wrestling program.
Yeah, I think, what great points right there. And I mean, didn't even plan to get into that at all, but it's so impactful because how many times in my past have I not had those important, maybe uncomfortable conversations where I'm truth telling, not belittling and not demeaning, but truth telling with a kid and with a family. And then also I think it's up to us too. So even if it's a kid that has chosen to stay on the team, the odds are that they're probably not going to get a lot of playing time. In practice, are we still developing that player? Because it can't just be about 1 through 5, or else your future of your program, or you'll lose those hardworking, great teammate kids that do just want to be a part of it, but also want to get better. You'll lose them.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And you'll get that kid who you find a way to get them minutes because they do something really, really, really well. We all have those kids. But again, the 11 through 15 kid, it's hard to find meaningful minutes for every single one of them. So again, if they're sophomore dressing varsity, that's one. I get there's a lot of intent, there's a lot of measuring things. What grade are they in? Their experience, all that type of stuff. But I've had kids that never really developed for whatever reason. Maybe it's my fault, but it's like
there are some factors outside of our control. If they remain 5'7", that's
right. They added to the program. They loved being there. Their teammates loved them, and when they got into the game, the crowd went freaking nuts, man.
Yeah,
stuff like that. So I just think you got to take every case individually. But again, having that honest conversation with a kid and their parents, again, it's not fun. But if I care about you, I'm going to have the tough conversation for sure.
How often do you have players play both JV and varsity, where their majority of their court time comes on the JV team, but they do sit on varsity and possibly get some minutes near the end of the bench? How do you do that?
Yeah, every once in a while. Like I did it this year, but we get 6 quarters in a night. Okay, so we get 6 quarters in a night. So they can do 3 and 3, or I might tell maybe 5. I think it's 5 quarters now. There was 6 for COVID. I think they're back to 5. I can't remember honestly because it never really came into play.
Yeah.
But sometimes I talk to the parents about, look, I want your son as a JV player. I want him to dress varsity, but if you don't want him to put in the time, like we have an away game on a Tuesday, we're going 2 hours away, which we do. Do you not want them to travel because JV may not play that night? JV doesn't always play. I get it if you don't want them driving 2 hours, 4 hours round trip for that stuff. So I think you just have an honest conversation. But I do have those kids that do both, but it's not a ton.
Yeah.
Because I really want them to be able to get some playing time, or I want them to experience the varsity, what it's like to be on varsity, how we do things a little different than maybe JV. And that's also telling them, man, next year we want you getting valuable minutes. If I'm asking you to dress now and learn everything that we do. Now I practice JV and varsity together. We have one gym. I don't have the luxury of sending a JV coach with another gym with them. So you're pretty much just all part of our program. But I do my best to have 2 separate teams. mainly, or we may play JV games on a night where they have to miss practice. They may play JV, but it's about respecting time, respecting parents' time, all that type of stuff.
And it could be a little bit too, since our schools are similar in size. We have like the players that start out with me on varsity before football is out. It's not always the same team. Like it might end up being a different team by the time football's out. We get into district play, and I really am comfortable with who I'm rolling with, and that's where you said something that made me think. You said, if we're traveling, I asked them, hey, do you want to travel? You're probably not going to play, to respect their time. Like to me, as soon as I heard that, I thought that just makes sense. And how many times, like I think it's good for us to evaluate every year what things we do in our program and what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. Because I think if I look back, especially in my earlier years, I had policies and rules and I made them do things that doesn't make sense to do it. So I think that's a great little reminder there.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. But again, I think that we're like-minded when it comes to this for sure. When it comes to the players playing both ways, but some teams I know really need it. That kid's got to play valuable minutes on both sides. Yeah, absolutely.
I've rarely seen it be a negative thing. The only negatives I ever got about it was, I don't know if you've heard this, was the kid felt like he wasn't really on a team.
Yeah.
Because when I like guys to practice. We practice varsity and JV together as well, but I have my varsity guys a lot more. And there's a few of those younger guys that I just really want to influence more and be around more. And so they practice with us, they go play with JV, and it's kind of like throwing them into a group that they don't really have any chemistry with. And so it is delicate, and not everybody has to deal with that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like, mostly if you're going to help varsity, I'm not going to let you dress JV for the most part. It's your guy. Like they know JV is my priority and varsity is just kind of like icing on the cake type deal.
Yeah.
So I try to really, establish like, this is the team this is your main focus. And here's why you're coming to varsity, and here's the expectation for you on varsity. And here's the why. And if you have those little conversations with them, I've been blessed that, guys didn't feel torn, but I think that, if you need a guy he's practicing with your varsity all the time and just dresses with the JV, but doesn't see them as much, or it could be tough.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the Jamodi podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.